The silence that followed the Battle of Zarian 7 was broken only by the quiet hum of life support systems aboard the surviving human ships. Admiral Helen Cross stood on the bridge of TDS Valkyrie, watching as rescue shuttles moved between the wreckage of what had been the largest space battle in human history. 800 brave souls had given their lives to save 17 colonists, but those 17 survivors represented something far more important than numbers could express. Commander Jake Morrison was among the first colonists brought aboard the human ships. After 11 months of breathing recycled air and eating emergency rations, he could barely believe that Earth had actually sent a rescue fleet. The colony commander had kept detailed records throughout the siege, documenting every alien action and behavior pattern. His data would prove invaluable for understanding the enemy that humanity now knew existed in their galaxy. Dr. Lisa Bennett worked alongside human xenobiologists to analyze the captured alien technology scattered across Zarian 7's surface. The organic ships and biomechanical equipment revealed secrets that would revolutionize human science. The aliens possessed faster-than-light communication systems that could send messages across the galaxy instantly, energy weapons that drew power directly from space itself, and materials that could repair themselves when damaged. Lieutenant Ben Clark led the team responsible for decoding alien computer systems recovered from the battlefield. The task seemed impossible at first, since the aliens used biological processing units rather than traditional computers. However, Clark discovered that the organic system stored information in genetic patterns similar to DNA. Working around the clock with linguists and computer specialists, his team began to unlock the secrets hidden in alien memory banks. The breakthrough came when they accessed what appeared to be a central database containing military records and strategic information. The attacking force had been part of something called the Hegemony, a collective of 12 different alien species that had controlled this region of space for over 1,000 years. The database contained records of 47 different sapient species that had been completely exterminated by Hegemony forces, along with detailed plans for conquering dozens of worlds. General Rick Hayes established a permanent military base on Zarian 7, while the xenobiologists and engineers studied alien technology. The planet that had been under siege for almost a year became humanity's first fortress world beyond their home system. Marine engineers worked with the surviving colonists to rebuild the settlement with defensive systems based on captured alien technology. The mining operation resumed, but now it served a military purpose as well as an economic one. The most disturbing discovery came from the alien genetic laboratories that Dr. Bennett had found during the battle. The Hegemony had been collecting biological samples from every species they encountered, creating a vast library of genetic information from across the galaxy. The human samples they had gathered during the siege were part of this collection, suggesting that the attack on Zarian 7 had been as much about studying humans as destroying them. Dr. Claire Roberts made the connection that would change humanity's understanding of their place in the galaxy. The aliens had classified humans as a deathworld species in their records, noting that Earth's gravity, radiation levels, and biological diversity made it one of the most dangerous planets they had encountered. What the aliens saw as weaknesses, human emotional responses, chaotic thinking patterns, and aggressive behavior, were actually the result of evolution on an extremely hostile world. The alien records contained detailed behavioral analyses of every species they had conquered. Most intelligent life had evolved on stable worlds with predictable environments and gentle evolutionary pressures. These species developed logical, methodical approaches to warfare that the Hegemony could easily counter with superior technology. Humans were different because they had evolved on a planet that was constantly trying to kill them, creating a species that thrived on chaos and unpredictability. Within months of the battle, reports began filtering in through the quantum communication network that connected human colonies across space. The story of Zarian 7 was spreading beyond human settlements, carried by alien traders and refugees who had witnessed the impossible victory. Species that had been enslaved by the Hegemony for centuries began to whisper about the Terran deathworlders, who had defeated a superior alien fleet through sheer determination and tactical creativity. The political implications reached Earth, when President Karen Miller received communications from previously unknown alien governments. Species that had been hiding from the hegemony for generations suddenly reached out to establish diplomatic contact with humanity. They had heard about the battle and wanted to know if the stories were true. Had a single species really defeated hegemony forces in open combat and rescued their people from certain death? Admiral Cross prepared detailed reports for the Terran Defense Command that would reshape human military doctrine for generations. The battle had proven that human advantages lay not in superior technology, but in their ability to adapt quickly to changing situations. Future military development would focus on flexibility, speed, and the kind of creative thinking that had won the day at Zarian 7. The rescued colonists became heroes throughout human space, but they also carried a sobering message about the galaxy they now knew surrounded them. Jake Morrison traveled to Earth to brief government leaders about the hegemony threat. His testimony before the Terran Defense Council painted a picture of a galaxy where peaceful species lived in fear of aggressive empires that conquered worlds for resources and sport. Pete Williams worked with human engineers to reverse engineer alien technology, focusing on defensive systems that could protect human colonies from future attacks. The atmospheric poisoning devices that had nearly killed the Zarian 7 colonists were studied and countered, leading to new air filtration systems for every human settlement. Dr. Bennett's biological research led to medical advances that would help humans survive in hostile environments throughout their expansion into space. The most significant change was in how other species viewed humanity. Before Zarian 7, humans had been seen as newcomers to galactic civilization, primitive beings who had barely achieved faster-than-light travel. After the battle, they were recognized as the species that had done something no one thought possible, defeated the hegemony in fair combat, and refused to abandon their people when facing impossible odds. The quantum communication networks carried the story across known space, spreading the news that somewhere in the galaxy lived a species that would fight to the death rather than submit to conquest. Enslaved populations began to organize resistance movements, inspired by the example of humans who had traveled across the galaxy to save 17 people. The message was clear, and it resonated with every oppressed species. If the deathworlders could win against impossible odds, perhaps freedom was possible for everyone. Dr. Nathan Ford's final report to the Terran Council summarized the new reality that humanity faced. They were no longer alone in the universe, and they were certainly not the most advanced species in the galaxy. But they had established something more important than technological superiority. They had proven that some principles were worth fighting for regardless of the cost, and that courage could sometimes overcome superior firepower when the cause was just enough. The morning sun of Zarian 7 cast long shadows across the mining complex as Commander Jake Morrison walked through the main corridor of the colony hub. 3 years had passed since humans first set foot on this distant world, and the settlement had grown from a small outpost to a thriving community of 200 souls. Jake stopped at the large viewing window that overlooked the main mining operation, where massive machines carved deep into the planet's surface, extracting precious metals that would fuel humanity's expansion into space. Dr. Lisa Bennett approached Jake with her daily report tablet in hand. She was the colony's lead scientist, responsible for studying everything about Zarian 7, from its strange purple vegetation to the unusual mineral formations that made this world so valuable. Lisa had been working on cataloging the local ecosystem when she noticed something odd in her readings that morning. The atmospheric sensors were picking up unusual energy signatures in the upper atmosphere, patterns that didn't match any natural phenomena she had studied. Jake took the tablet and frowned at the data. The readings showed organized energy pulses moving in geometric patterns high above the colony. These weren't random cosmic events or solar flares. The patterns suggested intelligence behind them, something that was deliberately scanning the planet's surface. Jake's military training kicked in as he realized what this might mean. After 3 years of peaceful settlement, they might no longer be alone on Zarian 7. Pete Williams, the colony's chief engineer, joined them at the window. Pete was responsible for maintaining all the technical systems that kept the colony running. from the power generators to the atmospheric processors that made the air breathable for humans. He had been monitoring the same energy readings from his engineering station, and his expression was grim. Pete explained that the patterns were consistent with advanced scanning technology, far more sophisticated than anything humans possessed. The three of them were discussing the readings when the first ship appeared on their sensors. It materialized in the upper atmosphere like a ghost becoming solid, its hull reflecting the purple light of Zerion 7's twin suns. The ship was unlike anything in human databases. It had an organic appearance, as if it had been grown rather than built, with smooth curves and surfaces that seemed to pulse with internal light. The vessel was enormous, easily 10 times the size of the largest human transport ship. Jake immediately ordered a colony-wide alert. All miners were recalled to the main complex while the defensive systems came online. The colony's defenses were minimal, designed primarily to deal with wild animals or natural disasters rather than hostile alien contact. They had a few automated turrets and a single communications array powerful enough to reach Earth, but nothing that could challenge a ship of that size. More ships began appearing throughout the day. They came in waves, each group larger than the last, until 23 alien vessels surrounded Zerion 7 in a loose blockade formation. The ships maintained perfect positions relative to each other, suggesting a level of coordination that impressed and terrified the human observers. Jake ordered continuous scans of the alien fleet while trying to establish communication on every frequency known to human science. Dr. Bennett worked frantically to analyze the alien technology from her laboratory. The ships appeared to be constructed from some kind of living metal that could change its properties at will. Energy readings suggested they possessed weapon systems far beyond human understanding, capable of destroying the colony from orbit without effort. More disturbing was the discovery that the aliens were actively scanning every human life form on the planet, creating detailed biological profiles of the colonists. The situation took a darker turn when the alien ships began deploying strange devices into Zerion 7's atmosphere. These devices, which Pete identified as atmospheric processors, started releasing unknown chemicals into the air. Within hours, the colony's external air quality monitors began showing dangerous changes in the atmospheric composition. The aliens were systematically poisoning the air that humans needed to breathe. Jake gathered his senior staff in the emergency command center. The colony's doctor, Sarah Martinez, reported that the atmospheric changes would be lethal to humans within 72 hours. The colonists could survive longer in their sealed habitation domes, but the life support systems weren't designed for extended isolation. They had perhaps a week before the air recycling systems would fail and everyone would suffocate. Pete presented options for extending their survival time. The engineering teams could modify the mining equipment to create larger sealed areas and extend the life support systems, but this would only buy them a few more days. The colony's food stores would last months, but without breathable air, food became irrelevant. They needed help from Earth, and they needed it fast. The problem was distance. Zerion 7 was 18 months away from Earth using the fastest human ships available. Even if a rescue fleet left immediately, the colonists would be dead long before help could arrive. The colony's quantum communication system could send messages to Earth instantly, but physical travel still required time that they didn't have. Jake made the hardest decision of his military career. Standing in the command center surrounded by displays showing the alien blockade and deteriorating atmospheric conditions, he ordered Pete to prepare the deep space communications array for maximum broadcast power. They would send a distress signal on every frequency possible, hoping that someone somewhere might be close enough to help. The message Jake recorded was simple but desperate. He identified himself as Commander Jake Morrison of the Kepler mining colony on Zerion 7. He explained that 200 human civilians were under attack by unknown alien forces that were systematically poisoning the planet's atmosphere. Among the colonists were 43 children, families who had volunteered for this dangerous mission to establish humanity's future among the stars. He requested immediate assistance from any human or friendly forces within range. Jake paused before adding the final part of his message. He described the alien ships and their capabilities, noting that this might be humanity's first contact with a hostile alien species. The information could be valuable for Earth's defense even if the colony couldn't be saved. He ended the transmission with coordinates and a promise to hold out as long as possible. Pete boosted the signal using every bit of power the colony could spare. The message shot out into space on multiple frequencies, traveling through the quantum relay network toward Earth and any human settlements that might intercept it. The transmission reached Earth's Terran Defense Command in Geneva 6 hours later, arriving in the middle of the night shift. As the alien ships continued their systematic poisoning of Zerion 7's atmosphere, Jake stood at the command center window, watching his colonists work to seal their homes against the toxic air. He had sent humanity's first cry for help into the vast darkness of space. Now they could only wait and hope that someone would answer before it was too late. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Zerion 7 system, like ghosts materializing from the void. Admiral Helen Cross studied the tactical display on TDS Valkyrie's bridge, as sensors revealed the full scope of what they faced. 26 alien vessels now surrounded the planet in perfect defensive formations, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent energy that made them look like sea creatures floating in the black ocean of space. The Kepler colony's quantum beacon was barely transmitting, sending out a weak signal that indicated only 17 human life signs remaining from the original 200 colonists. 11 months of atmospheric poisoning had taken a terrible toll on the settlement. The aliens had been patient and methodical in their extermination, slowly killing the humans while strip mining the planet's valuable resources. Captain Dan Cooper, aboard TDS Phoenix, was the first to break radio silence when his sensors detected movement in the alien fleet. The enemy had spotted the human arrival and were repositioning their ships into attack formations. Admiral Cross had hoped for some element of surprise, but the aliens had been monitoring space around Zerion 7 for exactly this possibility. They had been waiting for Earth to send a rescue mission. General Rick Hayes gave the order that would echo through military history. Standing in the Combat Information Center of TDS Thunder, surrounded by 3,000 Marines ready to fight, for people they had never met, he transmitted a simple message to every human ship in the fleet. The time for stealth and careful planning was over. They would attack with everything they had and show these aliens what humans were capable of when protecting their own. The Battle of Zerion 7 began when Admiral Cross ordered all ships to attack simultaneously. 8 human vessels charged directly at 26 alien ships in what military historians would later call the most audacious assault in the history of space warfare. The humans had no tactical advantage except for one thing that the aliens had not expected: the desperate fury of a species that refused to abandon its people. Captain Amy Price led the first wave in TDS Lightning, her damaged destroyer screaming toward the alien command ship at maximum acceleration. Her crew had pushed the ship beyond all safety limits during the journey, and now they were asking it to perform one final miracle. The ship's experimental railguns, originally designed for mining asteroids, fired tungsten projectiles at incredible velocity toward the organic hull of the alien flagship. The effect was devastating. The kinetic weapons that humans had developed to break apart space rocks proved terrifyingly effective against alien bioships. The massive tungsten rounds punched through the living hull material like bullets through flesh, causing massive internal damage that the aliens' self-repair systems could not handle. The alien command ship writhed in space like a wounded animal, its bioluminescent patterns flickering as critical systems failed. Lieutenant Steve Johnson led Death Squadron, 24 human fighters against impossible odds. The pilots had trained for 11 months in theoretical combat against alien technology, but nothing had prepared them for the reality of fighting living ships that could think and adapt. Johnson himself destroyed 2 alien fighters before his craft was hit by some kind of bioelectric weapon that fried his electronics. He ejected from his crippled fighter and was picked up by a rescue shuttle, but not before seeing his wingman, Maria Santos, ram her fighter directly into an alien cruiser's sensor array. The turning point came when the humans demonstrated something the methodical aliens had never encountered: tactical unpredictability. While the alien ships moved in perfect formations using predetermined attack patterns, human pilots and ship captains made split-second decisions based on instinct and creativity, Captain Cooper performed a maneuver that would have been considered insane by any military academy, using his ship's gravity drive to slingshot around Zarian 7's moon and attack the alien fleet from behind. General Hayes launched the most dangerous part of the operation when he ordered direct assault on the planet's surface. The Marines loaded into dropships that would have to punch through the poisoned atmosphere while under fire from alien ground installations. The powered armor suits that protected them were humanity's most advanced technology, but they had never been tested against alien weapons designed to kill carbon-based life forms. Sergeant Maria Santos led the first wave of Marines onto Zarian 7's surface, landing near the sealed colony complex, where the surviving humans were making their last stand. The atmospheric readings inside her helmet showed toxin levels that would kill an unprotected human in minutes, but the Marines pushed forward through the purple fog that had once been breathable air. Their mission was simple: reach the colonists and establish a defensive perimeter until evacuation could begin. The surviving colonists proved they were far from helpless victims waiting to be rescued. Commander Jake Morrison had organized the 17 survivors into a fighting force using mining equipment converted into weapons. Engineer Pete Williams had modified industrial lasers into anti-personnel weapons, while Dr. Lisa Bennett had created explosive devices from mining charges. When the Marines arrived, they found humans who had been fighting for their lives for almost a year. The discovery that changed everything came when Dr. Bennett led a Marine squad to the alien ground installation that had been poisoning the atmosphere. Inside the facility, they found laboratories filled with human genetic samples and biological data. The aliens had not been simply exterminating the colonists. They had been studying human physiology and collecting samples for unknown purposes. Lieutenant Ben Clark made the crucial tactical observation that won the battle. While monitoring alien communications, he noticed that their coordination was breaking down as the fighting intensified. The perfect formations and methodical attacks were giving way to confused, disorganized responses. The aliens had evolved on a stable, high-gravity world where warfare was slow and predictable. They could not adapt to the chaotic, emotional fighting style that humans had developed through millions of years of survival on a dangerous planet. Captain Price made the ultimate sacrifice when her heavily damaged ship rammed the alien flagship. TDS Lightning's fusion reactor overloaded on impact, creating an explosion that destroyed both vessels but crippled the alien fleet's command structure. Her last transmission to the fleet was a simple message that every human ship received: make them pay for every inch. The alien fleet's perfect coordination collapsed as individual ship commanders struggled to maintain their formations without central control. The battle raged for 14 hours before the surviving alien ships began to retreat. 8 alien vessels had been destroyed completely, while others limped away trailing atmosphere and biological fluids. 3 alien ships escaped into faster-than-light travel, carrying news of humanity's unexpected resistance back to wherever they had come from. The humans had won their first victory against hostile alien forces, but the cost had been terrible. The Terran fleet launched from Earth orbit exactly 47 hours after President Miller gave the order. 8 ships carrying humanity's hopes streaked away from their homeworld toward the distant Zarian 7 system. Admiral Helen Cross watched Earth shrink behind them from the bridge of TDS Valkyrie, knowing that many of the 3,000 souls aboard these ships would never see home again. Captain Amy Price pushed TDS Lightning harder than any destroyer had ever been pushed before. Her engineering crew worked around the clock to keep the fusion drives running at 110% of rated capacity. The ship's hull groaned under the stress of constant acceleration, but Captain Price refused to slow down. Every hour they saved might mean the difference between rescuing living colonists or recovering bodies. The fleet's course took them directly through the Void Nebula, a region of space where normal physics seemed to break down. Navigation Officer Lieutenant Ben Clark had spent weeks calculating jump points through the cosmic phenomenon that had swallowed entire expeditions. The nebula was filled with gravitational anomalies and energy storms that could tear ships apart or trap them in space-time loops forever. General Rick Hayes used the dangerous journey to prepare his Marines for combat, unlike anything humans had ever faced. The training simulations ran constantly as soldiers learned to fight in zero gravity against enemies with unknown capabilities. Sergeant Maria Santos drilled her squads in boarding actions, urban combat, and defensive operations. They practiced with every weapon in the human arsenal, from traditional projectile guns to experimental energy weapons that might penetrate alien armor. Combat pilot Lieutenant Steve Johnson led fighter training exercises in the cramped hangar bays of the transport ships. His pilots had never fought against alien technology, so they studied every scrap of data from the Zerion 7 transmission. The alien ships appeared to move in perfect formation, suggesting either advanced computer control or a hive mind mentality. Human pilots would need to use their creativity and unpredictability to overcome superior alien technology. The fleet's chief engineer, Commander Paul Mitchell, worked with teams from every ship to modify human weapon systems. They had no idea what kind of defenses the alien vessels possessed, so they prepared multiple attack options. Traditional kinetic weapons were upgraded with tungsten penetrator rounds designed to punch through any known armor. Nuclear missiles received new guidance systems for space combat. Most experimental were the plasma charges, weapons that had never been tested in actual battle. Dr. Claire Roberts spent the journey analyzing every piece of data about the alien attackers. As the fleet's xenobiologist, she studied the organic-looking ships and their energy signatures. Her discoveries were disturbing. The aliens appeared to be silicon-based life forms from a high-gravity world, explaining their methodical approach to warfare. They likely viewed the chaotic emotional responses of carbon-based humans as signs of primitive intelligence. 3 months into the journey, the fleet encountered its first major crisis. TDS Phoenix suffered a critical failure in its primary fusion reactor while traveling through a particularly violent section of the nebula. Captain Dan Cooper and his crew had minutes to prevent a complete meltdown that would destroy not just their ship, but potentially damage the entire fleet. Working in radiation suits, the engineering teams managed to contain the reactor breach, but Phoenix would have to continue the journey at reduced speed with backup power systems. Lieutenant Clark's navigation skills were tested again when the Yao fleet encountered a gravitational anomaly that threatened to pull them off course. The massive space-time distortion was like nothing in human databases, possibly created by ancient alien technology or natural forces beyond human understanding. Clark worked for 18 straight hours to plot a safe course around the anomaly, using gravitational slingshot maneuvers that added days to their journey, but kept the ships intact. Morale became a constant challenge as the months dragged on. The crews knew they were racing against time to save people who might already be dead. Sergeant Santos organized training competitions between different units to keep the Marines sharp and focused. Lieutenant Johnson held flight demonstrations that became entertainment for the entire fleet. Captain Price instituted daily briefings where she shared every scrap of news from their long-range sensors. The psychological pressure was worst for Admiral Cross and the senior officers who knew the true odds they faced. Intelligence reports suggested that the alien fleet around Zerion 7 had grown to over 20 ships, while the human rescue force remained at 8 vessels. They were flying into what could only be described as a suicide mission, but turning back was never discussed among the command staff. 5 months into the journey, long-range sensors began picking up disturbing signals from the Zerion 7 system. The colony's quantum beacon was still transmitting, but the signal was weak and intermittent. More troubling were the energy signatures from the planet itself. The aliens appeared to be strip mining the planetary core while maintaining their atmospheric poisoning of the surface. They weren't just killing the human colonists. They were systematically harvesting everything valuable about the world. Dr. Roberts made a breakthrough discovery when she detected organic compounds in the energy signatures from the alien ships. The vessels weren't just organic-looking. They were actually living creatures modified for space travel and warfare. This revelation changed everything about their tactical planning. They weren't fighting against ships piloted by aliens. They were fighting against alien creatures that had been turned into living weapons. Commander Mitchell's weapons modifications took on new urgency with this discovery. If the alien ships were living beings, then biological weapons might be effective. The engineering teams began working on chemical payloads that could disrupt silicon-based life forms. They also focused on thermal weapons, reasoning that creatures evolved in high-gravity environments might be vulnerable to extreme temperature changes. As the fleet approached the outer edges of the Xerion 7 system, Admiral Cross gathered her senior staff for final mission briefings. They had traveled for 11 months through the most dangerous region of known space. Many ships showed stress damage from the journey, and crew fatigue was becoming a serious problem. But they had made it farther and faster than anyone thought possible. The rescue mission that had seemed impossible was about to become reality. In 2 weeks, they would drop out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Xerion 7 system and face the alien fleet that had been systematically destroying everything human on that distant world. Admiral Cross looked at the tired faces of her officers and felt a surge of pride. These men and women represented the best of humanity, willing to risk everything for people they had never met simply because it was the right thing to do. The emergency meeting room in the Terran Defense Command building in Geneva had never seen such tension. Admiral Helen Cross stood at the head of the massive holographic display table, watching as politicians and military leaders from around Earth filed into their seats. The distress signal from Xerion 7 had arrived 6 hours earlier, and every person in this room knew that history was being made tonight. The hologram above the table showed the Kepler colony in frightening detail. 23 alien ships surrounded the small human settlement like predators circling wounded prey. Admiral Cross had spent her entire career preparing for theoretical alien contact, but the reality was far worse than any simulation. These weren't explorers or diplomats making first contact with humanity. These were exterminators methodically destroying everything human on that distant world. President Karen Miller entered the room, followed by her security detail. At 55 years old, she had led Earth through the challenging early years of interstellar expansion, making the tough decisions that established humanity's first colonies beyond the solar system. Tonight she would face the hardest choice of her presidency. The weight of 200 human lives hung in the balance, along with humanity's response to its first hostile alien encounter. General Rick Hayes pulled up his tactical analysis on ICAM, the main display. As commander of the Terran Marine Corps, he had studied every piece of military intelligence from the Xerion 7 transmission. The alien ships showed technology far beyond human capabilities, with energy weapons and defensive systems that could potentially destroy Earth's entire space fleet. The tactical situation was a nightmare for any military commander. The numbers were stark and unforgiving. Earth's deep space fleet consisted of 8 ships designed primarily for exploration and colony support, not combat. The fastest ship, TDS, Valkyrie, could reach Xerion 7 in 14 months if pushed beyond safe operational limits. The colony's life support would fail within days. Even if they left immediately with every available ship, they would arrive at an empty world with nothing but graves to mark where humans once lived. Dr. Nathan Ford, Earth's leading expert on alien psychology and behavior, presented his analysis of the attacking force. Based on their methodical approach and the systematic poisoning of the atmosphere, he concluded that these aliens viewed humans as either a direct threat to be eliminated or a resource to be harvested. The fact that they were preserving the planet itself while killing its inhabitants suggested they wanted Xerion 7 for themselves. The debate that followed would determine not just the fate of the Kepler colony, but humanity's place in a hostile galaxy. Secretary of Defense Margaret Thompson argued that sending the fleet would leave Earth defensively vulnerable. If these aliens were scouts for a larger invasion force, Earth needed every ship for home defense. Sacrificing 200 colonists was tragic, but losing Earth's entire population would be catastrophic. Admiral Cross disagreed strongly with this assessment. She argued that abandoning the colonists would send a clear message to any hostile aliens that humans were cowards who wouldn't fight for their own people. This first response would establish how other alien species would treat humanity for generations to come. If they showed weakness now, every predator species in the galaxy would see humans as easy prey. General Hayes supported the Admiral's position from a military standpoint. The Marine Corps existed to rescue Americans in danger, regardless of the odds or the cost. He pointed out that the colonists weren't just civilians hiding in a safe place. They were pioneers who had risked everything to expand humanity's reach into space. Abandoning them would betray everything the Terran military stood for. The discussion continued through the night as experts analyzed every aspect of the situation. The Treasury Secretary worried about the economic cost of mobilizing the entire fleet for what might be a suicide mission. The Secretary of State questioned whether military action was the right response to first alien contact, suggesting that diplomacy might still be possible. The Director of Colonial Affairs reminded everyone that Kepler colony volunteers had accepted the risks of deep space settlement. Dr. Ford provided the most chilling assessment of the night. He had analyzed similar situations throughout Earth's history and concluded that species who survived first contact with hostile aliens were those who fought back immediately and decisively. Species that tried to hide or negotiate were typically enslaved or exterminated. This moment would define whether humanity remained free or became another conquered race in an alien empire. President Miller listened to every argument before speaking. She had been elected on a platform of protecting American interest and expanding human presence in space. The Kepler colonists had risked their lives based on promises that Earth would support them. More importantly, this was humanity's first test against hostile alien forces. How they responded now would determine their species' future among the stars. The president's decision was clear and uncompromising. Earth would not abandon its people, regardless of the cost or risk. Admiral Cross received authorization to deploy the entire Deep Space Fleet to Zerion 7 with orders to rescue the colonists and eliminate the alien threat. If these aliens wanted a fight, humanity would give them one they would never forget. General Hayes immediately began mobilizing 3,000 Marines, pilots, and support personnel for the largest military operation in human history. Every available transport was loaded with troops, weapons, and supplies for extended combat operations. The mission would push human technology and endurance to their absolute limits, with no guarantee of success and no possibility of retreat. Admiral Cross worked with her staff to plan the most dangerous journey any human fleet had ever attempted. They would travel through the treacherous Void Nebula, where normal space-time was unstable and ships could be lost forever. The route would cut months off their travel time, but the risks were enormous. Entire expeditions had vanished in the nebula, never to be seen again. As dawn broke over Geneva, the orders went out to every human military installation on Earth and throughout the colonies. The Terran Defense Fleet would launch within 48 hours for Zerion 7. Every ship would be pushed beyond safe operational parameters in a desperate race to reach the colony before the aliens finished their extermination. President Miller made one final announcement to the assembled military leaders. This mission would establish the fundamental principle that would guide humanity's expansion into space. No matter how far humans traveled or how dangerous the galaxy became, Earth would never abandon its people. Any alien species that threatened human civilians would face the full wrath of a species that had survived and conquered the most dangerous planet in known space. The die was cast, and humanity's response to hostile alien contact had been decided.